No,
Right, 2 o'clock.
no, Mr. Johnson.
Oh, he's abroad.
Oh, is he?
Leader, 2 o'clock, so ready to go.
Thank you. Has the recording started? Excellent. Super well, good afternoon and welcome to this meeting of the Vale of Glamorgan Council's Cabinet on the 29th of February 2024. I'm Councillor Liz Burnett and chair of the meeting as the leader of the Vale of Glamorgan Council and Cabinet member for Performance and Resources. We will again be using the Council's hybrid platform, and so a few reminders for us that the meeting's being live streamed and recorded and will be uploaded to the Vale of Glamorgan Council's website as soon as practicable after the meeting. And then if I could ask all participants to ensure that if participating in person in the chamber, which we mostly are, their microphone not be activated, and that if attending remotely, that those participants should mute themselves when not speaking to avoid any background noise or feedback. And if wishing to speak, should activate their respective request to speak function or use the raise hand function. All debate and discussion will be raised verbally, not via the chat function for the sake of the recording. And in terms of chat function, it's used only to highlight any technical issues or to gain the attention of the chair or democratic services officer. But I think today most of us can just put our hands up if there's an issue. Before we go in, I'll do some of the others first and then I'll come back to that. So first of all, in terms of the agenda, if I can, agenda item 1 is apologies for absence, and I can see that most of us are here and Ruba is online, so we're all here, no apologies. Agenda item 2 is to receive declarations of interest, and if so, the nature of such interest. I'm not aware of any.
There were no declarations formally received for this meeting, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. As we go into the references, that's where I wanted to make a slight change. We do have an urgent item under agenda item 10, which is a reference from Healthy Living and Social Care Scrutiny Committee. I would propose to bring that up and deal with that after agenda item 4. And I would move that we take that step.
And I'll second that.
Yeah, and everyone's in agreement with that, so that's fine. I'm bound to miss the order when we get there, but never mind. So going on to agenda item 3, and this is a reference from Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee on the 15th of February on the initial budget 2024-25 and the medium-term financial plan 2024-25 to 2028-29. And they also had taken on the comments of the Environment and Regeneration Scrutiny Committee. There was a range of discussion in this meeting. I mean, I've either attended or viewed the footage online afterwards. And so there was discussion about, there were some consequentials that came through from an announcement by the UK government in terms of how that was going to be allocated. There was discussion about digital developments and savings, and one of the things that was discussed was about the removal of hardwired telephones within the council and replacing that with telephony through Microsoft Teams. I think that's going ahead fairly imminently. There was a discussion about some of the work that had been planned had taken longer than anticipated, but I think that tends to be the case at the moment. And there was a bit of discussion in terms of a comment in the report on the cuts in relation to national insurance. And I suppose, as I said, I didn't comment at the meeting, but I think it's worth noting these are my reports. They're not officer reports, obviously, I'm advised. I was disappointed at the cuts in national insurance from a council perspective, in contrast to possible support being provided for local government. And I think the situation that we've seen in local government across the UK, where quite a number are in dire financial situations, bears that out. So there was discussion about Teachers' Pay Award and the homeless initiative of No One Left Out. There was discussion about what inflation figures had been used. And I think that there was discussion because we're still living with the impact of inflation figures of 10% plus. And although that's gone down, we've actually got sort of a lag that's affecting us. There's quite a bit of discussion about the proposed charges for coastal toilets. And I think, it's worth clarifying that these were predominantly toilets that are used by visitors to the area. And in some ways, along the lines of what we've done in car parking, is for people who don't contribute through council tax to actually make a contribution, but that's been taken on board. They recommended that the comments of the Environment and Regeneration and Learning Committee, the Environment and Regeneration and the Learning and Culture Scrutiny Committees, together with the comments of that committee, be forwarded to us for our consideration. And I think the only other thing that Learning and Culture discussed was school transport and the post-16 proposals in relation to transport, and they are a concern for us because, like everything else, they are going up at a worrying level. So I think for us it's to note the content of the discussions in those scrutiny committees, and we can consider them when we're looking at the revenue report later on. So on that note, sorry, I've just gone through 2 reports. I haven't. On that note, I would move that we note agenda item 3.
And I'll second that, Leader.
Thank you. Then going on to agenda item 4, that's the draft capital programme proposals, 2024-25 to 2028-29, and that's a reference from Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee. And there were discussions about potential changes that had been made to the draft capital programme, queries about bridge structures and what that, how that was defined. Also about the Llanmaes flood alleviation scheme, which, although isn't finalised, is being brought back into the scheme. A discussion about pipeline schemes, and they're schemes that we think we'll be doing in the future, but they actually aren't fully defined as yet. And I learned something was actually in terms of what was edge switching, which is to do with infrastructure and how connections are made to the wider world, etc., in relation to things like home working. So we've done quite a lot of that. This committee also looked at the reference from the Learning and Culture Scrutiny, where they discussed the funding for the specialist resource base at Pencoitra High School. And that is being funded from the Directorate's internal funding, and so they're looking to work out how that is being funded, but there'll be an update as soon as possible. But they passed on to Corporate Performance and Resources their concerns over the Pencoitra High School's resource space, and just referred it to us with a recommendation that their views and comments were considered. Well, yes, their words and comments have been considered, and so on that I would move that that we note.
And I'll second that, Leader.
Then, this is where I nearly missed it. I need to go and get agenda item 10 up. And this has been sent to us as an urgent item. So it's 10.1. And it's reference from Healthy Living and Social Care Scrutiny Committee on the 6th of February. And that's the minutes of their budget working party meeting. This is in contrast to the budget working group that's part of the budget setting process within the council. And they had a meeting to discuss the budget proposals and to see whether or not there were any suggestions that they could bring forward. And it's actually detailed in the appendix, or in as part of the meeting report, the questions that were asked and responses, etc. So that's quite comprehensive. And they recommended, and looking at the recommendations, it's worthwhile looking at the reasons for recommendations as well to get full clarification of it. That they recommended that the minutes of the working party be noted and referred to Cabinet for consideration. So we're considering them today. They recommended that an informative booklet or leaflet outlining what the council and others offered in terms of help and support be produced by the council. And that was to support elected members in dealing with inquiries that they'd received. So that is for the council and for the scrutiny committee to have a conversation with officers in terms of what is currently provided and how any provision would fit together. I know that I signposted somebody the other day to the wellbeing support team in the contact centre, and they were absolutely fabulous at signposting that individual to sources of support. So be worthwhile to have a look at that, and that an innovation day be arranged and hosted by the Vale of Glamorgan Council, inviting external organisations that are making developments in technology and equipment, but not sure exactly what developments in technology and equipment. So again, that is for them to have a discussion. That was a scrutiny recommendation. And that the Healthy Living Social Care Scrutiny Committee budget working group be established to meet on a 6-monthly basis. Well, again, that's something for the scrutiny committee to determine. So all that's for us today is that we consider the minutes of the meeting, which we have done, and so I would therefore move that we note.
And I'll second those, Leader.
Great. And Eddie, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, it was really, I would say it was useful to read the questions and the responses given. Clearly, there is a focus on the budget within the social care and health, and what I got from this particular set of minutes was that the officers are doing what they need to do, and the challenges are there. They were explained in greater detail regarding the increase in need and also the numbers that are coming through. And you know, that's a reality that we're having to deal with. So when we are talking about challenging budgets and also the overspends that are coming through, it's just the situation we're in. And it's unpalatable sometimes that we can't provide everything that we need to, we want to. It's not the will's there, but unfortunately we're in a space where sometimes people don't get the care that they want, and but we can see from the officers' responses they are looking at different ways of doing things, and they're all available. And I'm hoping that the scrutiny committee are more aware of what's come through, and that during the scrutiny meetings, particularly when we get lots of presentations on what the social services are doing, that that they will be taken on board. And I do recognise when somebody says, well, we need to know what services are being provided. The bottom line is there's such a scope and broad breadth of services that to put that down in one booklet, leaflet, I would argue that we're going through a budget setting, we're actually looking at what services we're providing. And even in the last month, we've had different providers saying they can't fulfil that. So therefore, any booklet that we produce would be out of date. And I would suggest that would be onerous in its undertaking. We've got outlets for that advice. Council members are trained and briefed when they take on the role. And also we've got the contact centre, and we've got the C1V, and we've also got pods within Barry and the like. So I would suggest that we've got sufficient. It's not always the case that as individuals we might know the answers, but as councillors we do have a system in place that people can go to. So I just thought I'd say that at this opportunity, because I may not at the scrutiny. Thank you.
Thanks, Eddie. Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think the other thing is that we could have information purely on what's available from a social care perspective, but actually our wellbeing team are so skilled to work across the council, social care and health, that they can pull together other helpful strands. So it could be that somebody who is maybe, you know, stuck at home feeling lonely or whatever, we've got a fabulous officer that supports older people to become physically active. And so understanding the types of activities that go on there is something that's also helpful. So it's actually that human interaction that allows us to develop synergies to better serve residents. So, you know, I think there's a lot of opportunities, and it's opened up a line of thought. What the best solution for that is, I don't think we've quite got to that yet. Super, thanks, Eddie. And I haven't got any dissent, so therefore we've agreed to note. So moving into budget reports, first of all, we've got agenda item 5 is the capital monitoring report from 1st of April to 31st of December last year. And at the time that the report was written, because there's obviously a bit of a lag, the approved programme of just over 103.6 million means that if all requests to amend the programme are approved, which are contained in the report, the revised forecast outturn is projected to be 96.763. So that's looking at the fact that there are some that there might be a few delays on and might just slip into next year. Historically, it tends to be school projects where it's where do the holidays fit into the end of the financial year. The spend to the end of December is 48.3 million, and there's an error in the heading of table 2 which refers to spend as at 30th of September. That should have been as at 31st of December, which I mentioned earlier. Appendix 1 is the financial progress on the capital programme during that time, and Appendix 2 sets out the changes by directorates from the approved budget, which we set last year. And actually this has been a really good way to monitor slippages and deliveries, etc. And, you know, as a result, we appear to have a much greater handle on exactly what's happening with the programme. During the year, there's been a further review of the capital programme, and that's been undertaken to fund high priority bids so that we don't have sufficient funding to pay for everything. So we have to prioritise. The schemes that are proposed to be removed from the capital programme are 780,000 in the 2023-24, the current financial year. And over the coming years, that's 2024-25 to 2028-29, is 10.7, just slightly over 10.7 million. I know it's of concern to a lot of people. The council continues to explore options for a replacement household waste and recycling centre at Llandau. But sadly, despite ongoing investigations, we don't have any immediate options available. And I know that that's going to be of particular concern to Eddie Angwin here. Interim measures mean that the road, which is the biggest issue, are going to be upgraded, and that we will secure a lease for the near future while we continue to explore opportunities. And once we have that, obviously we have to then at that point find the money to go with it, and that's when it would come back into the capital programme. But we're not in a position to just leave money sitting in a programme when we don't have a scheme to allocate it to. As I said, the schemes are being closely monitored and to identify any overspends or slippage, and about 7.7 million has been requested in terms of slippage in this quarter's monitoring. The report details recent delegated authority requests that have been approved, and it also notes the use of emergency powers, and they're detailed in Appendix 1. There's a couple of really good schemes that have been mentioned. That's the Porthkerry Country Park improvements, which were funded by the Welsh Government grant under Brilliant Basics, which also funded the Cosmeston ones last year, didn't they?
Yes, did.
And the Courterville multi-use games area in Penarth, which opened in October last year. The report requests make several amendments to the current capital programme, and some of the larger ones are related to a scheme to enable the payment to transport for Wales around the Barry Railway Depot scheme, and the reprofile of Band B of Ysgol Derry and the City Deal scheme in the 2023-24 and future years capital programme. The recommendations before us today, and you'll be delighted to know that I'm not going to read these. They are listed from page 2. So in fact, there are actually 4 recommendations, but recommendation 4 is pretty huge. From page 2, page 3, and just over half the way down page 4. There aren't any changes to those, so I will move those as tabled.
And I'm happy to second those, the shortened version. Thank you.
Super. Let's just move that over. So item 6 is more revenue monitoring, and or is more monitoring. This is the quarter 3 revenue monitoring, and the report sets out the position at the end of December last year. The overall position shows, as well we well know, the continued and sustained pressures across social care, and the continuation of pressures in respect to road maintenance, or as most of us know, potholes, and school transport, which have both been persistent challenges, both through 2022-23 and this current financial year. Some of the pressures being addressed as part of the 2024-25 budget proposals, and pressures also reported in respect of unrealised savings and income across services. We are fortunate to have earmarked reserves that can be used to offset these pressures, and the overall position is reflected in unplanned use of reserves of 6.9 million in the current financial year, plus a further 6.7 million of school balances. There are a number of environments or sort of moves between budgets as part of the report, and 440,000 in terms of environments distribute some of the additional funding set aside as part of the current budget to reflect the increase in energy costs. There are also environments within social services and corporate resources to correct the allocation of budget between different parts of the budget. In terms of schools, it's currently projected that schools will outturn with a net of a £850,000 shortfall, and that's going to need a contribution from the council's general fund. But we'll continue to work with schools to try and achieve balanced budgets, and schools. You could use the word sort of schools are being challenged, but schools are. As I said, we are working constructively with schools to help them to make those savings where possible. In terms of the central learning and skills team, we've got unplanned use of reserve to offset school transport pressures, and also that we've got additional learning needs pressures, and they're being offset by the additional learning needs implementation grant. Social services, Q3 monitoring shows a slight reduction in the Q2 pressure overall, and this reflects an increase in the pressures in children and young people services and a reduction in the pressures reported in adult services. But significant growth has been allocated as part of next year's budget to address some of the changes in need within this service area and a number of transformation proposals. And I know as a cabinet we were discussing the fact that while COVID seems so long ago, so many of the pressures that we are experiencing at the moment are as a result of some of the issues that were created by the pandemic. Neighbourhood services and housing, there are key overspends relating to carriageway maintenance, so we're back to that pothole topic again, and additional challenges in terms of recruiting and retaining HGV drivers. There are some favourable variances in relation to rate rebates in the service that we can use to offset the overall position, but there will be some unplanned use of reserves to offset the pressures. Corporate resources are reflecting a small underspend, mainly through the restructuring in terms of office accommodation, etc. Place Directorate are projecting a small drawdown from reserves to offset some unrealised savings against the private housing budget line. And in terms of policy, they've got a favourable variance of just over 3.3 million, and that will be used to offset overspends in year, including additional funding allocated in children's services. The underspend in the policy area relate to council tax recovery, and in terms of the savings that are outlined in the report, they continue to be on track. There is some mitigation and delay against the 2023-24 targets, but there is an expectation that the full year's savings can be achieved going forward. So I think all credit to our departments for meeting what was a hugely challenging savings target, and something that they're probably going to have to tackle again this year. So in contrast with this report, we only have 2 recommendations. so I can read those. And that's the recommendation one is that the position with regard to the authority's 2023-24 revenue budget be noted, and the report be referred to corporate performance and resources scrutiny committee for review. And secondly, that Cabinet approve the budget environments for 2023-24 presented in this report. And I'd move.
And I'll second those recommendations.
And everyone agreement with that? Yeah. Going on to agenda item 7, and this will be a reasonably brief run through, hopefully, because our role here is to approve this for for its ongoing journey to full council next week, which is where it will be debated in full by every member of the council before we the aim is to set a budget balanced budget, can't even speak now, that from that date, as we are legally required to do. So the council's draft budget proposals were published at the end of last week, and that was a couple of days before the Welsh Government settlement on Tuesday. So while there are no changes to the overall settlement set out in the report, but there was additional detail on standard spending assessments, and so there's a supplemental report that included today, which has been sent out to all members, which provides additional information. So the council is facing significant financial pressures in excess of 38 million when we started, and has had to do significant work to mitigate these. Now, I suppose mitigate is a tricky word, because deciding what you're going to do with a £38 million gap means that some of that 38 million isn't going to be done. And they are things that we actually know that in a perfect world that our residents need. Then we have to look at what we are receiving from other sources and how we're going to stitch all that together. So in terms of reducing that 38 million, it's not possible, for example, to fund pay awards in full. There are limited resources to meet the full demands of care providers, to fully meet demographic growth. And that's not only numbers of people, but it's numbers of people requiring services, or the complexity of those services. And so there will be challenges in terms of demands on the services that we provide. This is, as I said, it's against a backdrop of very constrained public finances. The 6.69 million, which is a 3.4% increase in the grant we receive from Welsh Government, alongside the proposed 6.7% increase in council tax, falls short of meeting the additional costs. To be fair, the 3.4% increase in grant that we received from Welsh Government was the best that we could have hoped for in reality. And, you know, going back to my earlier comment, that it completely relates to the poor settlement that we received at a UK level. Whether or not there's a budget on the same day as we consider this in full council, and whether or not there will be any news of funding for local government, I don't know. But at the moment, looking at what's in the media, not expecting much, if anything at all. So, you know, we are where we are. We've been consulting in a number of ways to inform how we best allocate our limited resources. So apart from the specific budget consultation, we had the Life in the Vale survey in August, and there will be a more complete report on that coming to Cabinet before long. And in that survey, we asked residents' views on what they expect from the council. And this is now chiming with the ambitions on the focus of social care provision and affordable homes. There's also been a 4-week public consultation period on the budget for consultation in January, along with reviews by the council's 5 scrutiny committees. Residents, in the consultation, residents were supportive of the ambitions to target resources to social care, housing and schools. So, you know, we are on the right track. There was less support for the council tax increase. And I think it's fair to say if we could have avoided that, we would have. Also, the increases in discretionary charges, where we've increased them by the rate of inflation. But there was more appetite for the introduction of some new charges. So that's things that people value that the council can do. And I think this fits in with the transformation agenda that we brought a report to the last Cabinet on. Even with this, though, the Vale Glamorgan council tax is below the average for Wales. And it's worth noting that if we were at the average for Wales, we would have quite a few million extra in our budget. But that is a choice that we make. And and in terms of the expected council tax increases across Wales, we are again we are at the lower end of that, and sadly a number of councils across Wales are in the position of having to propose, you know, double-digit increases of over 10% or more. There was a good level of discussion at scrutiny, but sadly, as is often the case, relatively few alternatives. That I think most of us can look at the proposals and say, well, we don't like that. And there are a lot of things that I can look at in there and say, well, I don't like that. But we are in a position of trying to stitch together a balanced budget. What often happens is that when we get to full council, that people's views will be put forward at that point. And, you know, it's whether or not they're workable. It is very difficult at that point to take those on board if we are trying to work through numbers to balance our budgets that we are legally required to do. So we will debate that, and probably at length on Wednesday. But I think what's worth mentioning is that one thing that you will see in the final proposals is that we have removed the proposal to charge for toilets at coastal areas. Members felt that was not something that they would want to do, and we will have to find it was 5,000. But I think the issue is that when the savings are focused on such a small area of our budget, that even 5,000 is quite important. But I think we'll do that. And in the same way as Cabinet took the decision that we would delete consideration of not supporting bus services. And that was a decision we made previously. So as a result of all this, there's still, for next year, there's a £7.7 million savings programme. And that's predominantly tactical in that we will be reviewing services and looking at how we can do things more effectively. But there will be some transformative initiatives too in those. to have another multi-million pound saving programme next year is going to be a challenge. But we do have a good track record on that, which we've seen. I actually got a letter from a town centre business earlier this week who said, you know, can businesses clean the bit of pavement in front of their shops? And I said, well, you know, it's not something that we would require, but it's something we would be incredibly grateful if, you know, if people did, because it would actually help us. But that's not in the savings. But it was interesting to get that letter. The Vale of Glamorgan, I said it earlier, has managed its resources effectively over a number of years, and for that I thank previous administrations for their role in achieving that. And we do have healthy reserves, which at this time provide a level of assurance. But those reserves can only be used once, so we can't use them for year-on-year funding. But they're under pressure. And so we've actually reviewed them further so that we can cope with pressures such as the volatility in social care and the changing risks faced by the council. So they now match not only our corporate plan, our annual delivery plan objectives, but also our risk profile in terms of going forward. The report also includes the statutory statement from the Council's Section 151 officer on the robustness of estimates and the adequacy of reserves. And while we're in a challenging position, they're both given a clean bill of health, which is reassuring. The prospects for longer term are also gloomy. We are already looking ahead into next year, and it looks equally as challenging as this year. And I suppose, to be honest, a lot hangs on the Chancellor's budget announcements next week. And I think that a lot of us will be watching the TV next week before we go into full council. If there are any changes, then we will have to consider those at a future date because we won't have any details. And already looking to, you know, the further year ahead, there's already a gap of 9 million in terms of what we need to achieve. But I can see that Mark wants to come in, but I think all I can say is, as a council, we are up for the challenge. We are up for delivering sustainable services to our residents. And the work on our reshaping programme, our next reshaping programme, is already underway. So before I go into recommendations, do you want to come in now,
Yes,
Mark,
please.
or after
That's
recommendation?
okay, Leader.
So if I can bring Mark in now, that would be great.
Yeah, thank you very much, Leader. And thank you very much for that digest of a very, very important report. I would like to put on record my thanks to my officers who worked very hard in getting to this position, given the severe financial pressures that we face in my directorate area of neighbourhood services and building services. And clearly, you know, we'll be working together. I'm, of course, very pleased that we're not incurring charges for toilets in this financial year. This is something that, you know, we've had to look at, and we've had to look at lots of difficult things. But admittedly, you know, pressures are still going to be there for the next financial year and years overhead if the situation continues. But can I put it on record to thanks to all my officers? So thank you.
Thanks. And Gwyn, did you want to come in?
Yeah, if I may, Leader, thank you very much, and thank you for an excellent report. I would certainly be fully supportive of our budget. I think it's a credit to the staff that worked so hard on this, and I would like to thank Matt and all his team, all the SLT team who have spent months and months sorting this budget. And it's been quite a challenging time, as we know, as a cabinet since last September. However, I think we come out of this exceptionally well when you consider the whole of Wales. Now, we come out at 17th out of the 22 counties, which quite honestly is exceptional. And I think the work that we have done, but at the same time, the big thing to remember is I always remember in many full council meetings in the past talking about the budget, about spending our reserves. Spend more of these reserves. And I do remember as well a leader of the council saying, once you've spent these reserves, they've gone. Well, the only reason we can have a lower settlement this year than many of the Welsh councils is because we've got reserves and they've been managed exceptionally well. And I would like to thank everyone for their work for this. And I think we've come out very well of this budget when you consider the whole of the picture that the country is facing. We got to remember the UK councils, or the English councils, I should say, 2/3 of those are going towards bankruptcy. And it just speaks volumes, I think, of the Westminster government and how they're managing their business. So I think we've done exceptionally well. Well done, Leader. Thank you.
Thank you, Gwyn. And we will revisit all of it, I should imagine, at the at full council next week. And I can remember the words of another leader in Wales who said, she said, I know that people are going to shout at me for the next month. And she said, and she talked through the issues in her budget, and she said, I don't want to do any of this, but I have to deliver a balanced budget. And I was in a meeting last week, and she was there, and I said, that really hit home, that you say you're putting all this together and you just know that it's not what you want to do, it's not what you want for our residents, but we have a legal duty to deliver a balanced budget, and we think that this is how we can do it in the most effective way. So we will debate it in full council. Now, I need to sort out, because we've got the supplemental report and we've got the main report. So there is one recommendation from the supplemental report, and that is that Cabinet recommends to full council that the supplemental information provided in this report regarding updated standard spending assessment figures be endorsed as an update to item 7 on the meeting agenda. Can I do them all at once? What do I have to do? Yeah, double check I get the governance right. And then on page 3 of the main report, there are recommendations 1 to 8. Most very standard. I suppose I need to mention recommendation 8 is that we are using the urgent decision procedure as set out in section 1514 of the Council's Constitution, in order that this report can go on its journey to full council for next Wednesday. And so I would move those recommendations.
And I'll second those, Leader, including the supplemental report.
Thank you. Everyone in agreement? Yeah. Agenda item 8 is the capital strategy. We've just done the monitoring, which has some aspects of that which are the same. And so this report sets out the proposed capital strategy for 2024-25, and that's at Appendix 1, and then also the 5-year capital programme proposals, which go from 2024 to 2025 to 2028-29, and that's in Appendix 2. Capital strategy looks at the longer term view of the Council's capital investment requirements and outlines the various strategies that identify the priority areas for capital investment, and also the external factors that mean that we have to have capital expenditure. It's actually quite difficult to predict capital resources over a long period, because we actually are advised usually about the funding that we're going to get from Welsh Government on a year-by-year basis, and also the priority areas for spend. So it could be that they have different priorities on, say, school building or something else. And I think it's also difficult to predict it with the uncertainty of the current economic climate. We're facing significant pressures in relation to price inflation and also the cost of living crisis, which has seen increases in the cost of materials and labour. And I think anyone that's got major capital schemes in their portfolio will know only too well about how the prices are going up. So this has had an impact on the current schemes in the capital programme and the funding available to fund new schemes. At the end of December, or mid-December actually it was last year, the Welsh Government announced the provisional 2024-25 general capital funding settlement, and the amount awarded to us was 6.986 million, and that was about 3.5 million grant and about 3.4 million of supported borrowing. That's a decrease of 11,000 from this year's general capital funding. As we haven't had any other further indication from Welsh Government, it's assumed for our planning purposes that the budget from next year, 2025-26 onwards, the level of capital funding will be flatlined at about sort of slightly under 7 million, and then remain constant. So that will be adjusted if that's different. And the summary of the capital programme and how it's funded is given in the report. So that's the total value of capital schemes over the next 5 years, and that's 387.6 million. So that's quite a phenomenal amount still. And then that's 25.4 million for the Band B Sustainable Communities for Learning programme. But that excludes the pipeline scheme. So I should imagine that Rhiannon will be bringing reports to get funding for other schemes. And 205.8 million for the housing improvement programme. So that's quite a challenge for Sandra to deliver. The funding table also highlights the unsupported borrowing requirement to achieve the programme, which is 167 million, and 134 million of which is in relation to the housing improvement programme. Since the draft capital programmes in January, proposals in January, there have been a number of amendments to the 5-year capital programme, and they're all detailed in the report as a whole, but and they're included in Appendix 2, but there's slippage that's been requested as part of the Q3 capital monitoring report, which we discussed earlier. And then between 2023-24 and 2028-29, there's 1.9 million funding available for decarbonisation schemes, and there's also been emergency powers have been used to allocate the funding to incorporate LED lighting, PV solar panels, air source heat pumps, etc. across the council's asset base. There's details on reprofiling the Cardiff Capital Region City Deal Scheme, and also that the council's, we've moved some funding around, the council's non-treasury investment strategy scheme is now being funded using 12 million of prudential borrowing instead of 10 million of borrowing and 2 million of reserves. And that's basically due to the review of reserves where they've been repurposed due to the current financial situation. As match funding included of 518,000 for the Llanmaes construction scheme, that was originally proposed to be removed from this year's capital programme within the draft capital proposals report. However, match funding's been added back into the 2024-25 capital programme as part of the final capital proposals, and full details are within the report. Appendix 2 includes full details of the asset renewal budgets for the 2024-25 capital programme. The final settlement details will be out shortly from Welsh Government. And from here, this report goes to, similarly to the revenue report, goes to Council on the 6th of March to enable the council tax to be set by the 11th of March, which we're legally required to do. It must be capital reports that have the long recommendations, I think. So the recommendations before us today are on agenda item on page 3. Do you want to come in, Rhiannon, before or after recommendations?
Oh, what I was going to say is how pleased I am that we've been able to achieve what we have in the last year, and looking forward, we have achievements yet to come. And bearing in mind the parlous state of the budget and funding, you know, it's with great pleasure that we're able to, you know, provide these facilities for as many young people and children as possible. Thank you.
Agree. And it's interesting, you know, sort of, we're fortunate we can travel around the Vale to various projects, and knowing that we're on to our last secondary school, that all others have been updated or rebuilt. And that even in these situations that we can say categorically that St Richard Gwyn will be delivered. If that means that there has to be borrowing, then we would have to. But St Richard Gwyn remains as a pipeline scheme once all the plans are together. So no, I'm very pleased on that. Sandra, have you got your hand up as well?
Yes, following on from Councillor Birch and everything that's happening within education, obviously, I have a responsibility for social housing, tenancy engagement, and we're sort of very pleased with the way that the house building programme is currently being undertaken and the number of houses that we will deliver over the next year. But also, if you look ahead on the HRA between 24-25 to 28-29, it's anticipated there'll be 206 million spent on that. The sort of quality standards that we're providing with the houses that we have, you know, already in stock to ensure that we meet the Welsh quality standards is fantastic. But just the whole team, you know, the enthusiasm that there is there to ensure that we are building houses at the level that we can really do that, to provide homes for people that are of a standard that are second to none, really. So yes, it's always good to be able to sort of highlight this within the cabinet as well, and on let people know exactly what we're doing. So thank you, Chair.
Yeah, it was interesting that we were having a conversation earlier, weren't we, today, and reflecting back to the decisions that were made by Councillor Brooks here in terms of building our first our own properties, and the work that was put in at that stage to get to the position now where we have multiple developments. You know, not huge developments, but we have multiple developments in progress to provide homes for people. So, you know, as much as it is hugely challenging, there are an awful lot of very good things that are going on in this council. So, no, thank you for those contributions, and I look forward to seeing the completion. So we have, on page 3, we have 5 recommendations before us, and I'm going to take those as laid out, but I think again it's worth mentioning that in order to get this report to full council on the 6th of March, that the use of the urgent decision procedure is set out in section 1514 of the council's constitution is used. So on that basis, I would move the recommendations.
And I'll second those recommendations.
Thank you. And then going on to the final report for today is the Treasury Management and Investment Strategy 2024 25 and update for 2023-24. And there's also 2 supporting appendices, that's 1 and 2. So the report provides an update on the Council's Treasury management operations from April 1st last year to 31st of December last year. And actually, councillors, as we do every year, councillors have received a briefing on Treasury management. And it's handy with the current situation that those who weren't able to attend that will be able to view it online to bring themselves up to date on the current situation. So it's an update on the Treasury management operations over that period. All activities were in accordance with the Council's approved strategy on Treasury management. And that's sort of that details of money borrowed, repaid, where we invest money, etc. The 2024-25 proposed Treasury management strategy statement, minimum revenue policy statement and annual investment strategy are set out in Appendix 1. And to do that, we follow sort of very sort of laid out guidance and various codes and things. And so we use things like the SIPFA Treasury Management in the Public Services Cross-Sectional Guidance Notes 2021 edition. We've got SIPFA's Prudential Code for Capital Finance in Local Authorities, the Local Government Act 2003, and Welsh Government Guidance on Investments. In relation to Treasury Management Strategy, Minimum Revenue Position Investment Strategy, which is outlined in Appendix 1, the main topics covered are the reporting requirements of the SIPFA Code of Practice, statutory, prudential and treasury indicators, which are detailed in the strategy. The treasury management training, as I mentioned, that we had, and that's included in terms of the training needs for officers and council members. The economic background, that's a summary of the current market conditions affecting the UK economy. Prospects for interest rates, and there's a forecast table with notes considering the sort of upside and downside risks to these forecasts. The report notes that bank rate is considered to have peaked at 5.25 and is forecast to start falling from early half of 2024. So we hope. There are balance sheet projections, that's the projections reflecting the final capital proposals from 2024-25 to 2028-29, which assisted the Treasury team in developing their borrowing and investment strategies. The details around borrowing, and the council is in an under-borrowed position with total external debt outstanding at the end of December last year at 145.4 odd million, with an estimated capital finance requirement as of 31st of March 2024 of 204.5-ish million. The average rate of interest paid on external borrowing was 4.37%, and the borrowing requirement 2024-25 to 2028-29 is estimated to be 202.377 million, which includes 18 million of replacement borrowing for debt that's maturing. It's a minimum revenue provision, which tends to get referred to as MRP in the report. That's the resources the council must put aside in each year to repay the principal sums borrowed, and that's known as the minimum revenue provision. The estimated minimum revenue provision for 2024-25 is just over 6 million. In terms of our investment strategy, the council's primary objectives, and I think this is worth noting, is the primary objectives for the investment of its surplus funds are to protect the principal sums invested from loss. So we actually take a very cautious approach in that at the end of that investment, we must have that money back. We would not take any decisions which would result in a loss of that money. And so it's to protect us from loss and to ensure liquidity. Investment income is important, and we do receive investment income, but that is secondary. I think that's quite an important detail of our investment strategy. The council's taken quite a laddered approach when placing investments, so it can respond to changes in bank rate as well. We seek to maintain a minimum £30 million investment balance, in addition to any working capital surplus during the period. And if that's not possible, then if we do have a shortfall, we'll rectify that the following year. In 2024-25, people often ask us actually about this, the council will place investments with the Debt Management Office, UK local and police authorities, UK Treasury bills, money market funds and a bank interest yielding deposit account. So again, these are ones that have been assessed for investment potential, but also that are safe. Total investments as of 31st of December 2023 were 50.495 million at an average rate of 5.4% for the period 1st of April 2023 to 31st of December 2023. And then moving on finally to Appendix 2, that's the Treasury Management Policy Statement. And that's that the Council, Treasury Management at the Council is conducted within the framework of the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy's Treasury Management in the Public Services Code of Practice 2021 edition, and that for ease is called the CIPFA Code. And the main council policies covered by this report are detailed in that appendix. So it is very complex, which is why we have annual training on it, but it is crucially important to the financial sustainability of the council. And we have a large number of recommendations before us on this report. And so if you look at page 3 of the report, there are recommendations 1 to 5. And then just flipping over onto page 4 is recommendation 6. So I'm going to do, as I've done before, is I would move these recommendations as laid out, but have specific mention of recommendation 6, which is the use of the urgent decision procedure as set out in section 1514 of the Council's Constitution, so that this report can go to Council on the 6th of March. So I look forward to covering it again next week. So I would move.
And I'll second those recommendations.
And there's nobody wanting to comment on the Treasury Management Report. So there we are. Excellent. So because we dealt with the urgent item earlier on the agenda, I don't have any other agenda items today. So just remains me to thank everybody for your attendance today and your constructive comments. We'll stop the meeting, but if we can wait here until we know that the live stream, etc., has finished. Thank you.